The thing is, I don't need a leader to be anything that they're not. What I need for them is to be everything that they are. Every child is capable of leading, but they lead in a different way, with a different style and a different set of skills. And me teaching them things isn't going to change any of that. I always say that the thing I say to people is that I'm not a particularly patient, or I'm not a particularly empathetic person. It's just not built in my DNA. And if you gave me $1 million to be more patient and more empathetic, you know what I'd be? I'd be a millionaire who's not patient or empathetic, because you can't change the DNA of who I am, and nor should you want to, because when you change what I'm bad at, you also change what I'm good at. And so I'm a believer that it's not about putting information into kids, it's about getting things out of kids. And I think it's about understanding who they are and putting them in situations in which their skill sets will allow them to thrive and be successful and serve others in a positive way.
Welcome to Director's Circle, a podcast featuring insight from music educators and school leaders discussing their philosophies on the administrative leadership of a comprehensive music program. I'm Doug Conrad, and today's guest is Mr. Scott Lang from Chandler, Arizona. Let's begin. Hello everybody, and welcome to Director's Circle. I'm Doug Conrad. Thank you so much for listening. I would first like to say that if you are enjoying our episode, the best way to stay updated on all future episodes and to catch up what we're doing with the show is to go on over to our Facebook page under Director's Circle and liking to stay updated on all news and events with the podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as subscribing to the show on iTunes, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, and Spotify to stay updated on all future episodes. Now, with our guest today, you've probably heard of him before. He's a very big name in the music education industry, especially in the field of leadership. His name is Mr. Scott Lang, and whether you've seen him before presenting at a conference like the Midwest Clinic, reading one of his well-known books like Leader of the Band, or even if you have used his recruitment resources with a well-known resource, Be Part of the Music, Scott is a great speaker and advocate for music education, and he does many great things to advance our profession. So without further ado, here's our interview with Mr. Scott Lang. Hello, Scott. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been a really great experience to get you on here, and now we're hitting the month of November going into December, so like many marching band directors, I know you work a lot with marching bands, our schedules probably have both freed up. I know I'm finally enjoying my Friday nights. Is that kind of going the same way for you?
Well, I'm definitely getting a little more time at home. The way my schedule works is Thanksgiving to New Year's is my summer break. And so it couldn't come at a more fortuitous time of year, not only because of the holidays with my family, but because it's a really nice time to be in Phoenix is during those months. So yeah, it's just now starting to slow down. So I just was reading the other day about hibernation in bears, and now they're thinking that humans could actually benefit from hibernation like bears. And I started to think about band directors at the end of marching band season. They go into somewhat of a hibernation, although it's just as busy, and people don't understand that. But it was a really interesting thought, because what they found with bears is coming out of hibernation requires more energy than it took to go into hibernation. And so that they're now thinking that while humans may benefit from hibernation, bears might benefit from not hibernating. So that's my random stat of the day.
Yeah, I can definitely relate with that, because I know the feeling, like I know if it's the month of June, I take off. I check my email maybe 3 times a week. I kind of hang out on the couch. I do a lot of time catching up on TV shows and such. But then, once mid-July comes, when you got to start sending out the staff emails, checking in with student leaders, definitely just even that initial opening of your laptop just to get things going, that can be a definite push. That's a unique perspective. So anyway, with that said, to start things off a little bit, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background?
Sure. I'm just a band director. I mean, I always was and always will be. The audience and the student may change, but the passion for music education doesn't. I taught for 15 years in East LA and in Phoenix, Arizona, and I spent a year as an administrator, and then I took the leap into doing student leadership. And, basically what I found is about every 7 years, I looked for something new to challenge me. After 7 years of teaching, I started my admin degree. After 7 more years of that, I became an admin. Then I leaped into this, and after 7 years of this, I started Be Part of the Music. And so it's a constant evolution, but my passion always is and always was and always will be music education.
Yeah, and I know you had a background as a band director, but I never knew that you had a background in administration. So what was that experience like?
You know what? What I tell people, becoming an administrator and receiving that credential made me a better teacher. And I'd recommend for anybody interested, go get that degree, because it really taught me about the structure of schools. It taught me about how to assess teaching and learning in a different way, which made me, pardon me, it made me really rethink how I taught, but also taught me where money is and how facilities operate and how to strategize and plan strategically 4 and 5 and 6 years in advance. But the actual becoming an administrator was among the more miserable experiences of my life. And you would think, having spent all that time training and interning, I was ready. And I was cognitively and I was professionally, but I wasn't personally. Being an administrator is it's a very different experience from teaching. And what I tell people is you have to have the right personality set. Number one, everybody's angry at you. The kids are angry at you because you disciplined them. The teachers are angry because you didn't discipline them enough. And the parents are upset because you discipline. There is very little positive interaction in your day. You have to be the type of person that lets things roll off your back. And I'm not that person. The other thing is you have to be, as an administrator, you have to be content in small victories in terms of, I helped one child. I did one good thing today. And so if your personality isn't one that absorbs negativity well, and if your personality isn't one that does well with small minutia, then I think you're going to struggle as an administrator. And it doesn't mean you weren't a good one. It means you didn't feel good while you were doing it. And I always say being an administrator is the difference between being a band director and a private lesson teacher. If you like sitting in a room with one person trying to fix one thing, then you're going to be a fantastic administrator. If you're a guy who wants to be in front of 200 people fixing big things, you're not going to feel real good as being an administrator. So to me, it's not about your skill sets, it's about your personality type. And I didn't see that train wreck coming. But 6 weeks in, I knew that I wasn't going to last.
Yeah, that's a really unique perspective as far as putting that even in the context of what you do as far as like a one-on-one versus a large group setting. And even with that said, as far as what you do now in developing and teaching the skills of leadership to not only educators but even students as well throughout the country, how have you made that leap? Obviously it's very we can often understand making the leap from educator into administration, but how have you gotten to the point now where one day you were a band director going into administration and then saying, I really want to take this leap into being an author or even a person who develops leadership in others? Like, what's that journey been like?
Well, honestly, it's probably no different than anyone who's making the leap to write drill or choreography or tech. What I did is I started training my own kids, out of necessity. I wanted better bands, and better bands start with better leaders. And then, I had a roommate who was a band director, and he's like, come train my kids. And I was like, okay, sounds great. And then we started a small drum major camp, and that went really well. And at a part of that drum major camp, other people started saying, hey, train my kids. So I started reaching out and training other kids. And then this kind of amusing, like Tim was at my leadership camp. I hired Tim when I ran my student leadership camp. And after a session, Tim came up to me and he said, hey, I think you're really good at this. I think you could probably do this. You ought to think about it. And so I decided I was going to make the leap. And so I just made the leap and started this new venture and this new business. And the reason it's kind of funny is about 4 years ago, I had this epiphany, like this moment of clarity when I realized, oh my God, I bet Tim just said that to be nice. And I actually believed him. Oh my God, what was I thinking? And, but it worked out. And, fortunately I wasn't married at the time and I didn't have a family, so I could, eat ramen noodles and work out of my, my third bedroom, and it took off from there.
That's a remarkable story. And to get into such a specific topic in developing your career, obviously you are known for other things now, like be part of the music and such. But initially, especially when your brand really came through to prominence of being known amongst educators across the country, is that topic of leadership. So with having authored books on the topic, giving presentations across the country, and just all the resources that you've offered to educators over the years, what is it about the topic of leadership that excites you the most?
Well, the thing is, for me, as I've grown deeper into this dive, what I've begun to figure out is that everything I thought about leadership was wrong. We're so obsessed, both not only as a culture, but as a profession, education, with what can we put into kids? How much information can we put into them? And what I'm beginning to understand, and what I'm beginning to believe, and what I'm beginning to preach is that it's not about what you put into kids, it's about what you get out of kids. And I believe that every child is born with everything they need to be successful, not just in music, but in their life, is born in them. All the things we want kids to be as leaders. We want them to be hardworking. We want them to be dedicated. We want them to be focused. We want them to be selfless. We want them to be committed. We want all the things we want from them. By the way, they're unteachable characteristics. Now, you can write out the definition and they can memorize it, but that doesn't mean the kid's going to make the choice in the moment. And so the thing is, I don't believe it's about what we put into kids, information. I think it's about what we get out of kids, which is actions. And so I'm beginning to believe that not only is it not about what we're teaching kids, but what we're getting out of kids. But the other thing is that leadership is situational and personal. So I was doing a workshop for a really prominent band, and they had just come off of 3 days of leadership training. And this is a band that everyone would recognize. I mean, it's a top 12 program in the country. And I was going down the line and I said, what did you learn from this experience? What did you learn? What did you learn? And I got to this young lady and she said, they were all saying, I need to be harder working. I need to be more dedicated. I need to practice more. And I got to this young lady and she said, I need to be more outgoing. And I kept going down the line, and I have very little impulse control. And about 5 kids down the line, I stopped and I went back to her and said, what did you just say? She said, be more outgoing. And I said, are you comfortable in front of a group? She said, no. And I said, do you want to be the center of attention? And she said, no. And she started to tear up. I said, you're uncomfortable right now with me calling on you in front of your peers. And she goes, yes. I said, sweetheart, you don't need to be anything that you're not. You just need to be everything that you are. Mother Teresa was an introvert. Yo-Yo Ma's an introvert. Nelson Mandela was an introvert. Albert Einstein was an introvert. They seemed to do okay. And I looked at her and I said, the problem with telling someone what they need to be is what we're really saying to them is, you're not enough as you are. And why would we say that to a human being? The thing is, I don't need a leader to be anything that they're not. What I need for them is to be everything that they are. Every child is capable of leading, but they lead in a different way, with a different style and a different set of skills. And me teaching them things isn't going to change any of that. If I always say that the thing I say to people is that I'm not a particularly patient, or I'm not a particularly empathetic person. It's just not built in my DNA. And if you gave me $1 million to be more patient and more empathetic, you know what I'd be? I'd be a millionaire who's not patient or empathetic, because you can't change the DNA of who I am. And nor should you want to, because when you change what I'm bad at, you also change what I'm good at. And so I'm a believer that it's not about putting information into kids, it's about getting things out of kids. And I think it's about understanding who they are and putting them in situations in which their skill sets will allow them to thrive and be successful and serve others in a positive way. I may be a fantastic high school band director. I may not be, but but that doesn't mean I'm being a fantastic elementary school director. My vocabulary, my style, my energy level is a bad fit for that. I may be a fantastic high school music educator, but that doesn't make me a fantastic high school administrator. They are very specific and unique skill sets. And so I'm a believer, in short, which I never am, other than my height, is it's not about what we put into kids, it's about what we get out of kids, and that leadership is situational and personal.
And to elaborate a little bit about that on what you mentioned about as far as skill sets, a lot of leadership products or resources in the music education field often do revolve around the development of leadership skills for students or student leaders, especially in a band setting where we'll have drum majors, section leaders, and the like. But also then for music educators. Is there anything that you feel especially more pertinent to educators, or we could even say administrators on this level too, that are some of the most valuable skills to have in their leadership skill set?
I think the greatest leadership skill set that any human being can have, regardless of age, is hubris. That's what I believe. I believe ego is the enemy of progress, and ego is the enemy of people. I really believe that, and I deal with it myself, and I fight with it myself. But I think both professionally and personally, the more we can understand that it's not about us and it's about others, and the more we can understand that I don't have to put other people down to build myself up, and the more we can understand that just because my way works doesn't mean there isn't a different or better way that might work even better. The more successful we're going to be. And that's a hard thing to do when we're in a performance-based business. It's a hard thing to do when we have to beat out someone in an audition to get a chair. It's a hard thing to do when we have to beat out someone to get a job. It's a hard thing to do when they announce our ratings and our scores in front of thousands of people every Friday night, because that is an ego-driven profession. And I can speak personally that my own ego got in my own way and still does virtually every day. But the battle I fight is, I think, the battle that everyone should fight and needs to fight, and it's the battle for hubris.
Certainly, and to kind of touch on that topic too of skill sets, and as you put it, a skill set can definitely be applicable to whatever medium we teach in, whether it be band, orchestra, or choir, but even at the age level. But let's just say for the leadership skill set of a music educator and the leadership skill set for a student leader, would you say that they're very similar, or are they significantly different in any way?
That's a good question. First of all, let's be clear. Most student leadership is really just task management. We just like to put a sexy title on it. I mean, that's the honest truth of it. It's, can you take attendance? Can you show him where his dot is? Can you teach them a B-flat scale? Can you load the truck? Can you stack the chairs? Can you rack the stands? It's task management, and it's necessary, and it's vital, and it's important, and it provides not only the ability to relieve stress and tasks off the director's checklist, but it provides an opportunity for a student to buy in and feel empowered that they're doing something just beyond what the average student is doing. But to say that to call it leadership in generic, in a generic way, is like saying, a dinner in a third world country is beans and rice, and dinner in downtown Manhattan is steak foie gras. It's all dinner, but it's not. So I would say, the difference, the difference is, for a band director, it's very, very much about strategic planning and student and program development. And for a student, it's very much about role modeling and very much about task management.
Certainly, and with leadership resources now, especially in the last 10 years, they've really developed, because we could even go back maybe 20 years in a time machine, and with leadership resources pertinent to music education, a lot at that point, as Dr. Tim was really taking off with his career, coming out, especially with what you do now in workshops, but even now, with a lot of resources, you've written some books on the topic. Outside of leadership resources for music education, do you have any other heroes in the field of leadership development, or even any other favorite resources or books that are not specific to music educators, but are something that has impacted you in your field and what you do now, or your philosophy of leadership in general?
Well, I'll give you a couple. I don't know if they're valuable to anyone else. My favorite book of all time, and whenever anyone asks, I encourage them, and I'll send them a free copy. I'll buy it on Amazon and ship it to them, is Illusions, The Adventure of a Reluctant Messiah by Richard Bach. And it won't take you more than 2 hours to read, but you will get more information on leadership in that book than just about anywhere else that I've ever read. But the other thing is I would tell you, I like contrarian thinkers. And I'll give you a couple examples. Timothy Ferriss is a contrarian thinker. If you follow any of the Freakonomics writings and followings, they're contrarian thinkers. Malcolm Gladwell is a contrarian thinker. In other words, they're people who say up is down and down is up and right is left and left is right, and until you can prove it otherwise, we're telling you what truth is. And the reason I like contrarian thinkers is they really challenge me to think on, what is conventional thought really true? and they're very data driven and they're very analytical. But what I love about them is when I'm done listening to a podcast by Malcolm, I just listened to one by Malcolm. Here's one called In Revisionist History. I don't know if you follow him. He did a whole podcast on how the Boston Tea Party wasn't an act of patriotism. It was the mafia trying to jack up the price of tea. And it made me rethink all of American history. Like, oh my God, is everything I've been taught. And it's not about the Tea Party. It's about making me say to myself, don't accept anything at face value. You need to examine it, and you need to analyze it, and you need to believe it because it's true, not because someone told you it's true. So I really gravitate towards those type of people. They influence me.
Yeah, those are some certainly new resources too. I know, especially when I started this podcast venture, I had looked into a lot of the typical resources people look into in the beginning stages when you start to study leadership, whether it be like Tony Robbins or John Maxwell. And there's certainly a lot of cool resources out there, and even those ones I can't wait to look into as well. But even to now talk specifically about what you do as far as being a leadership developer, or if there's an official job title, I don't know. but anyway, like
my kids call me King of the Band Nerds. That's my official title.
Oh man, you should put that on a business card. That'd be good.
I'm definitely thinking about it, and it's a title I've worked hard to earn.
Yeah, I'd like to see that someday. But anyway, now to even kind of tie that into your specific role now as King of the Band Nerds, or even as a leadership developer, let's talk about, if we could just for a second, as far as being someone who develops and teaches leadership. As far as, let's say, if there were any differences in how you would approach teaching leadership to a certain population or demographic, like let's say if John Maxwell had a speech in Madison Square Garden, he had to cancel, but he hired you to come in and give a speech to the same people, or you were to go give a presentation like you've done before at Midwest on the topic of leadership, would you approach... even aside just from talking about music or band, would you approach teaching leadership in a different way to either of those demographics?
No. And the thing is, and I say, if you've never been to a workshop, but I start every workshop with I call myself the offender in chief. My job is to offend you with all my heart, because if you walk out of this workshop going, oh my goodness, I agree with everything he said, you didn't need to come to the workshop. You already agreed with me. My job is to stir the pot a little bit, because by doing that, I make you think about what you believe, and that's what the workshop's about. It's about what you believe. So if you walk out and you say, God, he really shook me on a couple things. I really had to stop and think about it. And to me, that's the greatest compliment. When a student walks out of a workshop and says, you really made me think about things, then that's been a good day. And so, the thing about just some of the names you mentioned, and I got in a little bit of trouble, and I get in trouble all the time. I made the comment of, I'm not a big fan of a lot of John Maxwell stuff, and it's nothing against John Maxwell, but the problem I have is he tries to quantify and calculate 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, 7 habits of highly effective people, 3 laws of leadership. And the thing is, are you sure it's 21? Why not 19? Why not 24? What about 6? Could it be 7.5? Is it different if I'm in East LA? That what they're trying to do is turn leadership into a formula. So let's do a little math. If it's a formula, let's play that game. If I have 20 kids in a room right now and they're leaders, do you believe that every one of them has a different leadership style? I mean, some of them are introverts, some of them are extroverts, some of them are musical, some of them aren't, some of them are patient, some of them aren't. Do you believe if I have 20 leaders in front of me in a leadership workshop that they have different leadership skill sets? Yes or no?
For certainly, as they're all different people, they're all going to have a different taste on life and even just leadership in general.
They're going to go back to their 200 kids in the marching band. And do you believe that kids are led differently? Some need a swift kick in the butt. Some need a hug. Some need a high five. Some need a stern. Some need 3 weeks to learn something. Some need 3 days to learn something. Do you believe that kids learn and absorb leadership differently? Yes or no?
Oh, of course.
Right now, you've got 4,000 potential leadership formulas. Okay, do you believe the situation impacts leadership? I mean, do we deal with a kid who's struggling to stay in step the same way we deal with a kid who's struggling with bulimia? Do we take a kid who can't play the F sharp melodic scale and we treat them the same as someone who's struggling with crippling depression? Does the situation impact leadership?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so you think about all the different situations you deal with each and every day with each and every child. It's a lot of situations. Do you believe time and place has an impact on leadership? I mean, we don't deal with someone Monday when we're learning to drill the way we deal Friday at halftime. We don't treat someone the day before state contest the way we do the first day of band camp. Fair point?
Oh, of course.
Number of leaders times number of leaders that they're leading times time and place times situation. Leadership is mathematically infinite. And I struggle with anybody who tells me it's the number 7. I struggle with anybody who tells me it's the number 21, because what they're trying to do is make leadership simple. So either leadership is simple, or wait for it, I'm simple. I guess I'm just too stupid to understand the complexities and nuances of leadership. So please dumb it down for me in 7 simple steps. That's like saying 7 tips to raising a good child. Well, God, if there's 7, I want to know, because I've tried 700,000 and my kids are, on any given day could go either way. That's my problem, is when you try and make leadership simple and memorizable and you make it a mnemonic, then what you're doing is saying either leadership is simple or you, the reader, are too stupid to understand it. Leadership is situational and personal, and that if you're accepting someone else's rules and someone else's laws, you're accepting someone else's version of you. And I just don't believe that. There are people that are highly impacted by my leadership style, and there are people that aren't, and that's fine. But I only know one way to be a leader, and that's me, authentic. And that's the beauty of this activity, and is that when I have 20 different leaders, I want them to be 20 different leaders, because then we can impact that many more kids. If I train you to only be one type of leader and follow one set of laws, then I can only help one type of kid. I need leaders that are patient and empathetic. You know why? Because I'm not. And I need you to balance me. I need leaders that are highly skilled musicians. Why? Because I'm not. And I need you to balance me. I need leaders that are good listeners. Why? Because I'm not. And I need you to balance me. I need you to be not what I am. I need you to be what I'm not.
Those are certainly some great points there, Scott. So to kind of take a step back, to even said one of the biggest things that you would like in a seminar observing you would be for someone to walk out disagreeing with you or to gain a new perspective. So if I were to go see you give a presentation tomorrow to 1,000 people, what would you want me to have the most disagreement on you with? Or what would be that one topic that you think would be the most enlightening that you would want me to get from it?
You know, that leadership is already within you. Stop looking for things outside and start looking inside. You know, if you ask every leader, how many of you, and I do this in workshop, I'll say, what's the most important characteristic of a leader? And they'll say kindness. And I'll say, how many of you have ever been unkind to someone in your band? Every hand goes up. What's the most important characteristic of a leader? Work ethic. How many of you have ever sloughed off when the rehearsal got tough? Every hand goes up. What's the most important characteristic of a leader? Dedication. How many of you have ever showed up 5 minutes late? Every hand goes up. Well, you have all the information. What good did it do you? I mean, what good did it do you? You didn't make the choice to use it. And that's an internal process. And so when people come to workshops, they're looking for some epiphany, some moment of enlightenment. And what I tell them is the experience you have is the experience you choose. The leader you are is the leader you choose to be. Don't look at the person on the podium in front of you. Look at the person in the mirror in front of you. That's who you are. And that's the one thing that I really work hard to get across to kids is it's in you. It's there. I can't take discipline from you. Can't. I can't rip compassion out of your body. I can't steal kindness from you. Those are things you have to choose and give to me. Here is my kindness. How can I use it? Here is my dedication. How can I help? Here is my commitment level. What can I do? Those are choices you as the follower make to be a leader. And there's nothing I can do to impact that. And, an example is, kids love to go, well, if I were in this situation, if a car were to be in an accident, and the car were to catch fire, I would, of course, run up to the burning car to help. But in real life, would you? And the answer is, I don't know. You will never know until you're in that moment of, between being right and being kind. You always say, well, of course I would be kind. But then you watch rehearsal and the kid says, you're late, I was on time. Well, why didn't you just pick him up then? That would be the kind thing to do. But you needed to be right. And that goes back to that opening comment we talked about, ego, hubris, the need to be right over the need to be kind. So I believe my greatest thing is I want to stir that pot inside you. I want you to look within and stir it and find out what comes out. I don't want you to come in and look for me to put more in there, because everything you need to be successful is already there.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Really kind of wrapping that up into as far as having the skill set already within you. It kind of makes me think of a quote in a book I saw just the other day. It was somewhere along the lines of, everywhere you want to travel is somewhere you've already been, and I can definitely relate with that. So now, aside from the resources that you are well known for dealing with leadership, another great resource that you are well known for is establishing and founding the resource that is called Be Part of the Music. That was actually once back in the day, I remember, correct me, it was probably around circa 2015 at Midwest. Be Part of the Band. I had the blue DVD and CD set, man. I love that because, like, I remember taking that home on my plane ride home. I was going back to the Pittsburgh airport, and I watched it on my laptop, and I really loved that. But the cool thing about that was, with all the resources and videos of beginning and recruiting kids in a music program, obviously it did start with Be Part of the Band, but then it's turned into Be Part of the Music, which has branched out to resources for not just band directors, but choral directors, or even with advocacy components for parents and administrators, and even orchestra directors. So how did that journey begin, where you started that product, but then developed it and turned it into a whole new thing with Be Part of the Music?
So long story short, I created Be Part of the Band, which was meant to bridge the gap between middle school and high school. And I did that, and it was a commercial product for Scott Lang Leadership, and it did really well. Because I saw that band directors don't have the time, the expertise, or the finances to create high quality resources. And so our theory was, let us do what we do best so you can do what you do best, teach. And it was really successful. And I had been approached a couple of times, say, well, what about middle school and elementary school and orchestra and choir? And I kind of put it to the side. It's not my skill set. It's not my expertise. And I was hanging out with Jeff Conner of the Boston Brass one night. And he's just a super, incredibly nice guy. And we have a great relationship. And we're on the MEA circuit. In fact, we were in Pennsylvania at the PMEA Educators Convention circa 2011. And we were getting dinner. And I said, God, what does it cost to bring, the Boston Brass to this event? And he told me the number, and he said, sponsored by Jupiter. And I kind of laughed. I said, what a waste of money. And he goes, no, it's for advocacy. I go, Jeff, everybody here already loves music. You're preaching to the choir. And he said, well, what would you do with it? And I sketched out this Be Part of the Music idea. Then Jeff Conner hit me in the face. He said, put up or shut up. If not you, who? If not now, when? And it really shook me, because I knew he was right. Because, again, what's the right thing to do? And so I called my team next morning. I said, I think we should do this bigger project. But the only way it works is we have to take our current product off the market. We have to release it for free. So I called some friends and sponsors, and they agreed to help defer some of the costs. And my team and I came up with the rest. And everyone as a part of the project donated their time. Even Richard Saucedo, who wrote the compositions in the videos. And it came out. And Be Part of the Band Elementary School was born. And we went back and we rebranded Be Part of the Music High School to be Stay in Music High School. And then we built Be Part of the Music Middle School, or Stay in Music Middle School, and Be Part of the Orchestra. And the last component is Be Part of the Choir, which we're still waiting on a couple things before we start working on that. So it really was an evolution over time. We've released a new product every year for the past 7 years. And after we did our first 4 videos, we realized having those resources isn't enough. We have to teach people how to use them. So we started doing automation, marketing automation, and we developed our Be Part of our parent advocacy newsletter, which we write the newsletter content for you, and you just send it out. We've now got 142,000 parents receiving that content every month. And it becomes about, what are solutions we can provide for you that are automated, that take something off your plate? And we have Wendy Higdon has a beautiful recruitment blueprint plan. You write in your recruitment date, and we backdate it 9 months, and we send you an email every 2 weeks telling you what you need to be doing leading up to that. So it's really been an evolution. Our Be Part of the Music website builder is just slick as heck and state of the art, because we realize every high school's got a band website. So and most middle schools, most elementary schools don't. So we now have a free website builder program. You go in, type your name of your school, a welcome note, pick your school color, and hit submit, and you have your own custom elementary school recruitment website, complete with documents, videos, parent information. It's just slick as all get out.
Yeah, and the thing I love about the resource is that there's just so much. The videos, but even with the videos, the kids see kids performing, and that's what's so cool. And aside from the letters and even the newsletters and the website resources, it's certainly a lot of stuff. So, in your time and years now developing these resources, how would you describe what are the biggest things needed, even with resources, or even if I were to go right now and you and I were to go start an elementary band program from square one out of school, what are the biggest things needed to really hook a kid into being involved in music?
Number one, kids are influenced by other kids. And that's why in our videos, you only see kids. And when you go to the parent videos, you only see parents. And when you go to educator videos, you see educators. The belief is fight fire with fire. And I learned that from watching the Disney Channel. My sons were watching the Disney Channel when they were kids, and I realized there's never an adult in a Disney show, ever. It's always a nanny that's 21. It's always a mentor that's 18. And I went, oh my goodness, kids with kids. So that would be number one, is use kids with kids. But, more importantly, if I could tell anyone anything, is you have to realize that recruitment is not an event. It's a system. People say, oh, I recruit. I invite kids to a halftime show. No, that's an event. That's not a system. How did you touch them before the event? How did you reach out to them after the event? How did you reach out to the parent? How did you reach out to your guidance counseling staff? How did you reach out to their peers? How many multiple times? How many venues did you do it with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? One thing I learned about from Be Part of the Music is that marketing is a system, and it requires multiple touch points at multiple times through multiple vehicles. And so what we did is, we don't believe that we should teach anyone how to recruit their children, but we should give them all the resources to be able to do it well, multiple times to multiple people in multiple channels.
So we've talked a little bit about recruitment now, but even another big aspect is retention. So let's even say once we've got that kid hooked on being an orchestra or band, and they've went through a couple years in the process, they've gone through middle school, we've got them in their freshman year of high school and high school marching band, for example. Let's put it in that context now at that age level, or even somewhat in the middle school level. What do you feel are the biggest things needed, whether it be a resource or something the director does to retain those kids, to keep them involved in music, but also to love the musical experiences they have?
Well, to be honest with you, I could give you a bunch of great business sounding answers of we need outreach and we need advocacy and but the bottom line is kids don't quit if they feel successful. It's that simple. If they feel like I'm a successful musician and I'm in a program that's achieving success, then they're going to stick it out. Now, not every child, and I don't think every child should stick it out. I mean, I believe that music is good for every child, but that doesn't mean every child's good for music. And music doesn't just mean band. Maybe a kid wants to join choir or orchestra or a rock band or a mariachi band. But the point is this: it all comes down to kids and people in general gravitate towards success. You know why the Patriots are so successful? They win. You know why the Buffalo Bills aren't? They don't. The reason people love the Blue Devils? They win. You know why people don't love the ones that don't? They don't. So it's about making sure that kid feels successful as an individual. My contribution matters and I'm getting better. And that the organization I'm in is progressing in a positive direction. That's the number one thing a teacher can do. Be a good teacher. That will keep kids involved.
Certainly, and to even touch on that now with the topic of success, because sometimes on the podcast that topic has come up, it can somewhat be philosophical up into the definition of the director in a way, but sometimes we can gauge success on how well an ensemble does at, say, an assessment or a competition, getting a superior rating at a festival, or even just achieving a new level in the difficulty of repertoire we perform, or a new level of maturity within the ensemble and how they perform. If you were to go and start a new job as a high school band director, and after a few months, once you're acclimated, how would you define musical success for your students?
Well, there's a couple different things. First of all, success is an internal validator. It's an internal process. Teaching and learning is an internal process. Ratings and awards are external validators, and you can't use external validators to measure internal processes. I feel superior today. how I feel is internal. I can't measure it with a rating that someone else gives me. Um, so we've got to stop using external validators for internal processes. But the second thing is success is defined by the director. If I were in this room with you right now and I said, look at the door, what would you do?
I would look at the door.
Right. If I say, check out that light bulb, what would you do?
I would look at the light bulb.
So you'll look at whatever I point at, whatever I tell you to look at, correct?
Certainly. You're the king of the band nerds, right?
I'm so excited this year. We're up 18% in enrollment, and 22% of our freshmen returned this year, and it was only 17% last year. What a great year we're having. I just told you where to look. I'm so excited that, my goodness, a year ago we only had 2 concert bands, and now we've got 3. I can't believe how successful this program's growing. I'm just pointing to where I want them to see success. That's what a teacher needs to do is, I can't control what place I come in because I can't control my competition, but I can control my own ensemble. I can control how my kids feel about that ensemble, and I can control what I use as a measuring stick for success. Kids will look to whatever you point to, and so point to the things you want them to look at, not the things other people want them to look at.
Certainly, and I like that point of how you kind of brought up just as far as where you direct student insight and where you look to success. That's a really cool point I've really never thought of in that way before. So now, to move on to some questions that we ask all of our guests, we'll go ahead and start off with this one. And with this one, it's unique with your background as a former director, former administrator, and even what you do now in leadership development. The question is, describe one of your favorite rehearsal tactics. So I'll let you maybe answer this in any way you want to, or even in a multitude of ways. If you want to describe a favorite musical rehearsal tactic, okay, what would that be?
And I got to tell you, in all candor, you sent me that question in advance, and that really stumped me. I'm like, holy smoke! But then I giggle. I'm like, oh, I know what it was. I started every rehearsal. I would leave my office and I would walk briskly to the podium, put up my hands, and go, guys, we got a lot of work to do today. Let's go, focus, and we're in on one. And I did that because even if I didn't have a lot to do that day or there wasn't a pressing issue, I never wanted them to know that. So my greatest little trick, and whether it worked or not, I'll never know, is walk briskly to your podium, start class immediately with a sense of urgency and the statement of, we've got a lot to do and not a lot of time, so let's get to work. Because it gave the kids the impression that, holy smokes, we better focus. We got a lot. He says we got a lot to do today. And some days it's like, all right, concert's not for 7 weeks and we're already playing lights out. We really don't. But I don't want them to know that. So that was the one tip. I did it every class and every rehearsal. And the second thing I kind of coupled it with is I took every clock off the wall. Time is what I tell you it is. I think that's more difficult now with cell phones. But I never allowed clocks in any of my classrooms. So those are 2 things. I don't know that they're great things, but they were things I did consistently every single day, every class, everywhere I ever taught.
Yeah, and that's a really cool point of just really getting down to business and rolling up the sleeves. But let's say now, even in your specific profession right now, like if you were to go tomorrow and give a presentation to 500 kids in the state of Montana, what would you do to really hit the ground running from square one, even if it's like, say, a limited session, like a 2-hour session? How would you start that session to let the kids know, hey, we're getting down to business now, but also to acclimate yourself with that group? What would you do in that setting?
Well, and you just really, I don't know if you realize it, made a really salient and smart point. It's about me acclimating myself to the group, not them acclimating themselves to me. And that took me a long time to learn, is that it's not about what I'm going to do today. It's about what you're going to let me do today. And so in every group is at a different place. You walk into some groups and they're sitting on the front half of their chair and they're quiet and they're focused, and their directors made sure every kid has a pencil and a pen, and they're been told, be ready and there are other groups you walk in and there are kids eating pizza in the middle of your workshop. There's workshops that I walk into and kids have been with me for 4 years, and man, they are fired up, ready to fly. And there are kids who walk in and they don't know who I am, and he's a stranger, and it's my 3rd day of band and I'm scared. So one of the things I do is I open up full throttle with raw energy, and I call it shock and awe. So that the one comment I get from almost every participant who goes through a workshop for the first time, they walk up and go, well, that's nothing like I thought it was going to be. And that's exactly what I'm after. Is that, holy smokes, whatever I thought. And every kid walks up and goes, look, I'm embarrassed, but I thought you were going to be really dumb and boring, and you weren't. I go, well, I know you thought that because that's what I would have thought at 17 years old. So my thing is I come out on fire for the first 20 minutes until I feel like they're like, well, he's not going to be boring. And then I can pull the gas pedal off a little bit and start to work with the group. But you have to meet them where they are. And so those first 50 minutes are about finding out, okay, can this group go full throttle, or do I need to nurse this group along? Is this group ready to get straight to content, or do they need a couple of jokes to warm up? And so it's a dating process. You're getting to know them, and they're getting to know you. And so it is an acclimation process.
Certainly. And to kind of talk about that a little bit too, as far as, in those first 20 minutes, the kids know you're Scott Lang. You're there to talk about leadership and helping advance their music programs, and that you are high energy. Is there anything else that you want those kids to know in those first 20 minutes, even just about you as a person?
I'm going to break and go backwards. So remember when I talked about hibernating bears? Mm-hmm. That's what I was doing. I was seeing if you would buy into my quirky humor, and to see if the listener would go, what? He's talking about bears? I got to listen to what this guy says. That's exactly what I was doing. I was checking the relationship with not just you, but I was checking the relationship with the listener. Although I'll never be able to gauge it, that's what I was doing.
All right, man. Aside from this interview, I got a free psychology lesson. Thanks. So
here's the thing you need to know. I break every rule in public speaking and leadership presenting that there is, but it goes to that deconstructing thing. It works for me, and I have found my own voice and my own pathway that works for me, and it may not work for everyone else, but it does for me. To any teacher and to any speaker, to any podcaster, I would just say, deconstruct and don't build what you think it should be, or what your student cooperating teacher told you it should be, or what your high school experience was. Deconstruct what you're doing and build it the way you think it should be for those kids in that moment, in that room. And it's okay to build it different next period, or build it different next year, or build it different at your next job. But don't do it based on what you've been shown. Do it based on what you know.
Certainly, and those are some great points. So now, to move on a little bit on to another topic where if anyone were to look into your resources, a huge component of that is advocacy and what music education does for us. And we could go off into data about academic research and what it does.
Nobody cares. Let's be honest.
How would you elaborate on that?
Okay. I use this analogy a lot. You like to knit, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I can see you're an avid knitter. You probably spend days, and you're probably all over the knitting websites. And I mean, Afghan wool versus South American wool, and steel point versus. I mean, you are. You probably you're going to hang up right now, and you're going to crochet a scarf. I can feel it in my bones. Are you an avid knitter? Be honest.
Myself, not so much.
Okay, so but I don't know if you know this. Knitters are more likely to have PhDs than non-knitters. Knitters are more likely to have 7 cats than non-knitters. Knitters are less likely to be serial killers than non-knitters. Do you know that knitters are less likely to catch a cold than non-knitters because they never leave the house? No, those are all important points about what knitting can do for your life. Are you going to hang up with this podcast and knit a scarf? Yes or no?
Probably not so much.
Okay. Change knitting to music education. What's the difference? Nobody cares. And the thing is, it's not that I wish knitters ill will. It's not that I wish them goodwill. I don't wish them anything at all because I don't think or care about knitting. Music education is the same thing. The problem with music education advocacy, it's 2 problems. Number 1, it's stagnant. We put up a website and it never changes for 6 years. And number 2 is you're preaching to the already converted. You know who goes to music education websites? Wait for it. People who love music education. You're not convincing anybody of anything. We've got to learn to preach to the non-converted. Nobody gets more religious in church. They're already in church. The point is, how do you get to the people that aren't in church? And that's what the Parent Advocacy newsletter is we're trying to outreach to people who aren't fans of music. Parents. You know what they're fans of? Their kids. That's all they care about. And that's all I care about. I want my kid to be happy, successful, and filled with great experiences. And if you can connect the dot between my kid and those three qualities in music, I'm in. But you got to get to me. I'm not going to your music education website, and I'm not going to read your music education facts and figures and stats, and I'm not going to listen to your podcast. I'm just a parent of a kid. I wasn't in band. I don't understand band. So we've got to understand that music education advocacy is about connecting successful kids with this activity, because everyone loves their kid. And we've got to understand that music advocacy is not an inbound process. It's an outbound process. We have to preach to the non-converted. So that the music education, we always knew we had the content to share. What took us 7 years to figure out was how to get to the non-converted. And once we realized, if we write all the content and deliver to the band directors free, and they can put their name on it, their logo on it, and take all the credit for it, they'll send it out to their parents. And we went from having 22,000 people on our Parent Advocacy newsletter list to 141,000 in 3 months. Now we're preaching to the non-converted. And it's dynamic content that changes every month. And by the way, it's leveled. We have elementary advocacy newsletters, we have middle school advocacy newsletters, and we have high school advocacy newsletters. We have them for band, choir, and orchestra. So it's conceivable a parent could be getting that content that makes those connections from fourth grade all the way through high school and never get the same content twice. It's always dynamic.
That's a really remarkable jump in the amount of people you've had following that, Scott. So if you were to go and talk to, say, some administrators, and especially with your background as an administrator, which will make this really a unique answer, if you were part of a K through 12 district curriculum development team, and you had to, pick, okay, are we going to offer shop? How many different ag courses, or what are we going to design for our kids to meet, whether it be different state standardized sanctions or anything like that? If you had to justify music as part of, not just in the part of being involved with the music programs such as band or choir, but the importance of music education, if you had to give like that 60 to 3 minute 60 second to 3 minute answer, why do we teach music in schools? What would that be?
The answer is irrelevant, because they're not listening. And the thing is, and I'm not trying to be cheeky, is that if I had 90 seconds in front of an administrator, it's not going to change the way they schedule. It's not going to change the way they staff a school. And here's the thing. I've never met an administrator or any person in my entire life that said this: God, I hate music. We got to eliminate music from the schools. God, music, it's a real pain in the butt. I've got to get kids. Music's a real danger for children. Have you ever heard that? I've never heard it. Have you heard it?
Not any time in my lifetime yet.
Okay, so there's nobody out there that doesn't like us. It's that we're not high enough on the priority list to get the attention and the staffing and the budget that we need. And the beauty of that problem is it's a solvable problem. The thing is, I've never met a problem in music that enrollment didn't make better. If you want an assistant, you know what you need to do? Grow your numbers. You want better clarinets, you know what you need to do? Grow your number of clarinets. If you want better staffing, you know what you need to do? Grow your numbers. If you want an upgraded facility, you know what you need to do? Grow your numbers. You know the one thing that you're in control of? Your numbers. The one thing, we have a resource for everything out there. Forked fingering oboe in Middle Elizabethan literature. There's a resource for that. Breathing, there's websites devoted to breathing. The thing is, the one thing that fixes everything is the one thing we were lacking a resource in. Enrollment. Enrollment is the game changer. There's nothing that enrollment doesn't fix. Not a single thing that I can come up with that enrollment doesn't make better. Focus all your time. And what people don't realize are students are the currency of the educational process, not just musically. More kids equals better bands, better choirs, better orchestras, but students are the financial currency of the educational process. In my state, every child, the school is paid $7,482 to educate every child. So if I have more kids involved in school, I have more money going to that school. Average daily membership, average daily enrollment. Well, the same thing's true with band. If I have 142 kids signed for concert band, they're going to have to give me 2 classes. If I have 242 kids for march band, they're going to have to staff it with a 3rd teacher. If I have more kids enrolled in a class, they're going to have to dedicate more resources to that class. The one thing that fixes everything is enrollment. And the thing is, it takes the administrator out of the equation. You don't have to like me. I got 70 kids enrolled in the class. You got to split it into 2 classes. And because student enrollment drives the schedule. It's that simple. Any assistant principal in charge of curriculum instruction will tell you the classes follow the numbers. The numbers follow the kids. Enrollment, 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 and then focus on enrollment. And the beauty of that is, I love all of this policy work, and I'm so glad there are people out there doing high-level strategic policy development and advocacy. But I can't control what my governing board does. I can't control what my state legislator does. I can't control what my government does. I can't control what the Department of Education does. And whatever they do probably isn't going to impact me for 3 to 5 years. Enrollment impacts me starting next year. Instantly. It's instant, and it's within my control. Enrollment, 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 and when you're done, focus on enrollment.
I certainly agree a lot with that enrollment numbers too. For anyone who's tuned into our previous episode with Stephen Benham, whose father is John Benham, who literally wrote the initial book that's sometimes considered the Bible of musical advocacy, even just putting that in perspective of retaining positions in a district, as far as even on the administrative side, which you could probably speak of. If I can have a band director that has 125 kids in one period, it really makes a lot more sense of even on the district financial side as a whole, and there's lots of great things with that. So now, to touch on another area now, so certainly through your life, you've had a lot of people that you've worked with as an administrator, an educator, and even in your field now. But if you had to narrow it down to 2 or 3 people who have really inspired you and touched you in your personal or professional life, who would those people be, and what lessons have you taken away from them?
Obviously Tim Lotzenheiser. The lessons are, he's every bit as shrewd as he is kind. And that behind that incredibly warm, embracing persona is a brilliant mind. And it's not often you see that combination in people. And what I will tell you is, the closer I've gotten with Tim over the years, the more I respect him. And I've always loved and liked him and respected him, but the closer I get to him, the more I stand in awe for the person that he is. So he would certainly be at the top of the hill. I've been fortunate that I lived with a roommate who was a band director for 11 years, and every day all we did was talk shop. And he influenced me in ways. John Gomez is his name. He influenced me throughout the first decade of my career in ways that I can't ever explain, because he's the polar opposite of me as a human being. He's thoughtful. He's patient. He's methodical. And those certain things I am. I'm a shoot from the hip. Let's rock and roll, people. I would also say I've been blessed. I've never had a bad administrator. I've had administrators we disagreed on what the right thing to do was, but I've never had an administrator that I questioned what they were doing was what they thought was the right thing to do. And so I would say those 3 things stand out immediately to me. But this profession is filled with remarkable teachers and remarkable people. And that's what my book, Leader of the Band, is about, is highlighting 10 people who I find extraordinary in 10 very different ways. Every one of your listeners has a gift to share, and every one of your listeners has something that's unique to them. And I said earlier in the podcast, don't go be the person you were shown or told to be the person you were born to be. That's unique to you. And don't let anybody else put a number or a formula or a set of rules on who you should be. Be you.
So now, to wrap some things up, if you had to offer any advice, whether it be general or specific, to music educators to help their students best thrive, what would that advice be?
Obviously, be the person that you want them to be. Good or bad, students reflect and programs reflect the personality of their directors. where you find high energy directors, you find high energy kids. And where you find methodical teachers, you find methodical kids. And where you find very musical teachers, you find very musical kids. So I think that, as my wife says, she was a teacher too for 20 years. And she went to band camp with me after we got married. And she's not from the band world, knew nothing about band. And she said, I so envy you. And I said, why? And she said, you see these kids more by the end of band camp than I see in an entire semester. You see them more by the end of the first quarter than I see them in an entire year. You get them before school, during school, after school, Friday nights, all day Saturdays. You get them for 4 years. She goes, every teacher gets in this profession to impact kids. And I didn't realize how much I didn't until I saw how much you do. And so, as Spider-Man says, with great responsibility, or with great power comes great responsibility. With that power to influence kids comes great responsibility. And kids will emulate the qualities they see in their teacher, good and bad. And so, obviously, be the best role model that you can be for kids, in both good and what you do well, but owning up to what you don't do well, so that they see that as well. That would be my best advice.
And that's a really good point, too, as far as owning up to what you don't do well. It's often what we focus on the best of, but, often reflecting then, too, on areas where we need to kind of grow in that sense. So, with that said, then...
question, which is hubris. What is the one thing every leader needs more of? And it's hubris. Myself included. I'm at the front of the line of needing to check my ego at the door and involve myself in more hubris.
Certainly, Scott. So now, to wrap everything up, I'd like to thank you again then for all of your time and wisdom. There's definitely a lot of new insights just in our conversation here that I've really gotten out about the process of leadership, how to think about it, and all the other things we've talked about. I would really just like to thank you again for being here on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I wish you nothing but the best until you said your summer break ending around New Year's Day or something like that, when you start the business back up again to get everything going.
Well, and thank you for hosting this wonderful service, and thank you for doing this for teachers as an active service, because I know how much time you put into this, and it's an active service. And thank you to all the teachers who do what they do every day. And I'll shut up with this, and it's hard to get me to shut up, is that I believe you're serving our country when you teach. I believe that when you volunteer to give way and above what others do, when you volunteer to receive way less than others do, and you do it for the good of others, it's just an act. It's just as much an act of service to our country and patriotism as it is to serve in the military or to serve in our first responders. I believe that nurses and teachers and social workers who sacrifice for the good of others are serving others. And thank you to each and every one of your listeners for their sacrifice for our country.
Thank you very much, Scott. So with that said, I wish you nothing but the best, and enjoy your upcoming Thanksgiving and holiday breaks.
You too, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving, and have a great one.
This concludes our episode. Many thanks to Mr. Scott Lang for sharing his time, wisdom, and insight on what it takes to be an outstanding leader for a music program and helping students achieve their personal and musical best. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow our podcast on Facebook under Director's Circle, as well as subscribing to the show on iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and iHeartRadio to stay updated on all future episodes. This is Doug Conrad saying thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in to the next edition of Director's Circle.